Hello, I am Jake Collins, and this is my commentary for the 11th episode of the Mummy the Animated Series, Howl. And we're starting in Greenland, which isn't something that's immediately memorable about the episode, I find. It is the werewolf episode. The fact that it starts in Greenland is very incidental. And indeed, this whole sequence is very Season 2, because they found here in Greenland a random MacGuffin, the chalice of Leif Erikson, and awoken this spirit that Evie calls a Loki. She also mentions it's a shame we didn't find the scrolls, so we can take it that they were there on yet another side track from the quest we were expecting, looking for the scrolls in Greenland. I mean, what made them think they'd find the scrolls there? Who knows? A strange opening, really. But we see there that Alex, despite having gained a decent amount of control over the Manacle and Would-I-See Naha-Beck, he's still working on it and isn't perfect yet. Because these things do take time. Well, usually they do, anyway. A very good episode with more niggles than immediately evident. 8 out of 10. This episode contains a pointless, MacGuffin-fuelled opening sequence, some very dodgy Irish accents, and an annoyingly anomalous use of the Manacle. That is, it's annoying in the next season, as the Manacle seemingly no longer has this power when Evie really needs it. It also makes the most arbitrary use so far of Imhotep and Weasler. If they're going to be that superfluous and detached from the plot, I'd rather not see them featured at all, as with the China episode. However, this episode is saved to no small extent by some interesting werewolf stuff, some compelling family dynamics, and a lot of particularly excellent voice work on both Alex and Rick. Yes, indeed. That very much sums up my feelings about this episode nicely. As I say, the use of the Manacle in this episode is anomalous. I call upon the power of the Manacle to bring forth what has left this world. It's only in this episode. Alex gains complete control of it in this episode, having discovered it a little way into the episode, unlike, as I was just referencing, Would-I-See Naha-Beck, which takes a believable and correct amount of time to get under control. But, as I say in the review there, it's more annoying in the next series when they really need that power. Alex really needs to try out that power in the second half of the 2-part season opener in Secrets of the Magi. More details about that when we get to it, I'm sure. And he just doesn't do it, doesn't remember it. The power no longer seems to exist. But it is also slightly annoyingly anomalous use of the Manacle in the denouement of this episode, as I'll mention when we get to it. And this is very Season 2 as well. The curator of the British Museum saying, "Thanks for bringing me this MacGuffin, Rick and Evie. Now, here's another one you can go and find." And we've got this thing about ancient Egyptian writings having been translated at this abbey in Ireland. So, of course, Evie thinks maybe the Scrolls of Thebes are among those translations. Not an unreasonable thought, of course. They're not going to be. So, again, being Season 1, that does make more sense for chasing after MacGuffins than it will do in Season 2. But, like being in Greenland and many bits of Season 1, more than I'd anticipated, it's very left field. Let's go and look for the scrolls here in Ireland now, why not? It's not really a linear, continuous quest, which is rather disappointing in many ways. And here are Imhotep and Weasler being introduced into the episode. I was surprised to see that this one is actually written by Tom and Greg, because I thought they had learned in the previous episode, the China episode, The Boy Who Would Be King, if you don't need Imhotep and Weasler, don't shoehorn them in. But they've done it here, Tom and Greg. They don't need Imhotep and Weasler, and yet here they are, shoehorned in, having really nothing to do with what's going on, just kind of hanging around, which is a bit of a shame. Here's the bit where Rick mentions, tantalisingly, his grandpappy telling him about leprechauns in the woods, comparing it to these country bumpkin Irish folk, who sound like Scottish folk, and their tales of the lycanthropes, the werewolves. And Evie's already mentioned Rick would like to go back to his ancestral home of Ireland, just for larks, to the curator. It was only a cover story, of course, but it's got us introduced to the idea, the O'Connell roots in Ireland. And I like that tantalising bit of O'Connell history there. Rick's grandpappy used to tell him these stories of leprechauns. He called him Grandpappy, an Irish thing to call him. So I would say that that means that Rick's paternal grandfather, Jack O'Connell's father, if you will excuse a bit of Season 2 cross-referencing there, was Irish, and that would make Rick third generation American, and Alex fourth generation American / also English, with plenty of Irish in the roots as well. So that's pretty interesting. Bit of history for the characters and the family, and how it all fits together. But yeah, going back to Tom and Greg, they didn't realise when they wrote Eruption much earlier in the series that they shouldn't shoehorn Imhotep in if they don't need to. So he was shoehorned into Eruption. But then, as I say, last time I thought they learned their lesson. The China episode, which Tom and Greg of course wrote, really needed not to have Imhotep, and didn't. And I do think this one would be a lot better if it didn't have Imhotep and Weasler hanging around pointlessly. Because they really do nothing. They're not even following clues on the scrolls. They're just following the O'Connells to see what they're up to, and not really getting to know anything or do anything. Great there, Alex uses once more Wujai Nahabek, this time successfully, to make the boulder blockade across the road to slow down the werewolves. Great stuff. And Evie comes up with this bobsled idea, which is rather like Alex and his surfing on dragon scales in the previous episode. Again, Wujai Nahabek used successfully there by Alex to open the abbey door as they are shooting down towards it. And those successful uses of the Manacle there make me want to say, of course, in the heat of battle, as I always say about Alex, thinking on his feet, he gets his head together, he does what needs to be done, shows the mental fortitude, and succeeds in using the Manacle when he really, really needs to. You could say, well, they were in an equal amount of danger in the opening sequence in Greenland when they were being chased by that ice spirit, and Alex didn't manage to use the Manacle successfully, but maybe then Alex's heart wasn't really in it. He believed the sled dogs could get them over that ravine, and that the Loki spirit wasn't going to get them, and they just weren't in enough danger for him to be completely focused on using the Manacle successfully and get control of it like that. So when the chips are really down and Alex needs to use it imminently to save their lives, not just speculatively to perhaps help in some small way, he can make it work, which is great. And as any canny viewer will have noticed during that little sequence there, Rick was bitten by the werewolf, one of the werewolves, and this is where we start to get this absolutely brilliant voice work from John Schneider as Rick, and they've matched it up in the animation. Alex, as usual, as I say in the review, does a lot of excellent voice work, particularly when he's talking about saving Rick, helping Rick, and his feelings for Rick. But Rick's really excellent voice work in this one comes when he's being Rick turning into a werewolf. Here he is, he's kind of manic, going through these books really quickly, talking quite fast. The others can't really keep up with his train of thought, and he's read this cookbook, and now he's lusting after various meats. Anyone wants some Cairo pot pie? I'm starved. And the werewolf starts to come through in his voice. It's extremely well done. The animation matches it perfectly. And the animators were lucky they had such excellent voice work to really make the whole effect with. Rick mentions there, my bite is even healed. It reminds me of the Incredible Hulk. I think Rick has a bit of a speeded up metabolism being the werewolf, and the way he's rather manic there and flicking through the books quickly, talking very quickly, thinking very quickly. He's kind of working at high speed. and the fact that his metabolism is working at high speed, his bite is already healed, backs that up, and it's very like the Incredible Hulk, so I think that's a good comparison to make. Absolutely brilliant delivery in that bit of, I need a shave. I mean, it's a bit more than a shave that Rick needs, isn't it? It's getting the werewolf out of him, which we'll see happen later in the episode, but not quite in the way that we're promised it's going to happen. And there we'll come back to the anomalous use of the Manacle, and that's what Evie has found in this book. No scrolls of Thebes here, what a surprise, but this book mentions the Manacle of Osiris, and this anomalous power that exists only in this episode, that is, bringing back the dead, which was, as I did say in an earlier commentary, mentioned as a possible power of the Manacle. And here is where we get to see how it works. Alex has this vision of ancient Egypt. It was different this time, yeah, it certainly was. Of the Manacle being used in this way, to, as Alex puts it, bring a ghost back to life. It looked more like bringing a mummy back to life to me. It came out of a sarcophagus, but let's not quibble. So Evie finds the incantation, how to do it. As Alex said, the kid in the vision read an incantation. And here it is in Evie's book. I call upon the Manacle to bring forth what has left this world. So, you'd think it might take Alex a while to master that power and use it in many interesting ways as we progress through the rest of this season, which is nearly over, and season 2. But no, it's only used, as I say, in this one episode very quickly at the end, and unlike Would I See Nahabek, Alex just has complete control over it straight away by saying the incantation. Although perhaps that's slightly unfair. He is doing it to save his dad, so he's very emotionally invested, and he does have to concentrate very hard and say the thing twice to make it work. So I guess it's not a complete walk in the park for him, but it is quick, and it is isolated, and it is anomalous, and I do find it slightly annoying. And then, as I say, when they really, really need it to use on Evie in season 2 and they don't, and no one even thinks of it, I find that extremely annoying. Evie and Imhotep managed to have a tiny bit of back and forth there that was quite decent, and this time Imhotep was the one doing the quip. I'll just pause in that little observation to say I'm surprised Corlin is ever going to go anywhere near Evie again. She's now whacked him with a bench, in addition to all those other things she's done to him, dangling him over a pit and shoving a boot over his head. But after she's whacked him with a bench, I should think he would want to stay well clear of her after this. But yeah, Imhotep this time was taking on the role that Rick normally takes on of saying the quip when the other character says something. Evie says, we're not really thinking about the scrolls at the moment. We've got other things on our mind. We have other problems. And Imhotep goes, and now you have one more, which is quite good. But again, it's only back and forth once. It's not really nice interplay. It's just a quick exchange with a feline and a punchline. And it's the best you're going to get from Imhotep's interactions with the goodies, which is a bit of a shame. But there we go, at least it's something, and it's quite amusing and remarkable, and that's why I remarked on it. You'll notice the floor is suddenly very unstable there. Jonathan found the loose board earlier, and has now used that information in one of his moments to trick Imhotep and Weasler has gone through the loose board, but then that's made the entire floor collapse, and Imhotep and Weasler have fallen into the water. Jonathan can't have been planning all that, surely, just from that one bit of falling slightly through a loose board he did. And here we get the reappearance of the quote-unquote Irish woman, and her son in a moment, and he is, it may be supposed and heard in his voice and seen from the cast, Nicholas Guest, who usually, when he is a guest, or even a regular really in season 2, voices Ardeth Bay, and much as Ardeth is a bit of a twat in many ways, when Nicholas voices Ardeth, he does a much better job than when he's voicing this Irish man who sounds extremely Scottish. And here we go, welding silver into weapons and making this disgusting mixture that's going to draw the werewolves to Alex in order that they can draw out Rick and save him. With the piece of wolfsbane, which is used in many different ways to combat werewolves, drive off werewolves, warn about werewolves, or nourish werewolves even in different legends. And in this case, apparently the wolfsbane is going to get the werewolf out of Rick, or at least that's what we're promised at this stage. I was talking about Alex standing up to people, and indeed creatures, things, in the previous episode commentary, and you may have noticed there, just before they left the Abbey, he stood up to his mother. Evie's like, I won't allow you to be used as bait, Alex. And Alex is like, of course I'm going to be used as bait. This isn't about me, this is about Dad. And that's where Chris does his really excellent voice work in this episode, building up those feelings about Rick, relationship between Rick and Alex. And I really like this little sequence with Alex here. Tut's like, oh dear, I'm a bit nervous for all these werewolves. You and me both, buddy, says Alex. But this reminds me of how I've said before, Alex is never quite as vulnerable as he appears. He's standing here, seemingly alone, looking quite small, vulnerable, all these werewolves closing in on him. One of you has to be my dad. My dad would never let me get attacked. My dad would save me. And then Alex's foot comes out, the shield pops up, Alex grabs the shield and says in a much more heroic tone, like I'd save him. And things go on from there, really. And that's some excellent voice work from Chris. As usual, presenting Alex there as quite vulnerable, seemingly helpless, seemingly quite desperate. And then, whack, shield comes up, he leaps into action and does what needs to be done. And of course it works. Here's Rick. So all we need to do now is get the wolfsbane into his mouth. And this reminds me of the computer game walkthrough that I've seen on YouTube, where Alex will give Tut little tasks to do in places Alex himself can't reach, and Tut then goes and does them, which I think is excellent use of Tut there in the video game. But what happens in this? Oh, the wolfsbane gets landed on by one of the werewolves and is destroyed. And Alex is like, well, never mind, let's just use this random magic one-episode power of the Manacle instead. And as I described earlier, it's not straightforward, Alex doing this. He has to concentrate very hard, a bit of grunting, saying the incantation twice, but it does work comparatively easily if you think of how much he struggles, or certainly has to work, to get to terms with Wujai Nahabek and later Shimin Rapidu. So yeah, rather anomalous, rather disappointing. It shows the Manacle's potential as something of a fix-all there, which isn't really what you want to see from it. Random power fixing everything at the end. The conclusion we were promised with the wolfsbane hasn't happened. It's just rather anomalous and rather disappointing. But as I say, it's more disappointing when they should be making good use, Alex should be making good use of this Manacle power, and doesn't in the opener of Season 2. Imhotep and Weasler pop into shot there, and the werewolves come at them, and they're straight out again. I mean, talk about pointless. They're not really a part of this episode at all, they're just hanging around. It's unnecessary, and I'd have preferred, as I say, to see it without them. John Schneider also does a very nice delivery there of my shirt. When Evie says they've found something, Rick is rather keen to get his shirt back. It may have been an improvised line. Unlike Alex in Eruption, he didn't take his shirt off on purpose and show us his pecs, but luckily for Rick, he didn't get the horrible treatment that Alex got of see-through nipples. Rick had no nipples at all, which is much better visually on screen. And of course in real life he does have nipples, but you don't need to represent them in a cartoon. We can all take it as read that they are there. Very nice bit of voice work at the end from Chris and John there, doing a cheesy cartoon ending, which could have come across as very flat and very silly, but because the two of them do such great voice work on it, it works, and I find it rather fun, even though it is, cheesy. It's the classic thing to end your cartoon episode with. Did Mom tell you we're going to Transylvania next? What? Says Rick. Just kidding, says Alex. I mean, it's cliched, it's hackneyed, it's in every cartoon you can think of, endings like that, just kidding endings. But thanks to the great voice work of Chris and John, that one works, and I enjoyed it, and overall, I enjoyed the episode. Do join me again next time for an episode I don't enjoy overall, the first half of the 2-part season finale, The Puzzle of Horus.